Hi there, and welcome back to Charm and Circumstance. I'm Ashley Bruggeman, your host, and today we're diving into one of the most foundational and surprisingly emotional parts of design, designing a whole home color story. If you've ever walked into a home and thought, wow, this feels so peaceful, or I love how this house just flows, there's a reason for that. It's not just about furniture or finishes. It's about how color carries you from one space to the next. Today, I'm going to share how we do that at Ashley Morgan Interiors, the philosophy behind it, the process we walk our clients through, and a few stories from past projects that illustrate how powerful a cohesive palette can be. So whether you're designing your forever home, refreshing a single space, or just love the art of intentional living, this episode will give you a peek into the designer's mindset for creating connection through color. From floor plans to 5-year plans, business to finding balance, I'm Ashley Bruggeman, an interior designer with a love for beautiful living and a belief that style and substance go hand in hand. I'm pulling back the curtain on design, resilience, and entrepreneurship. Expect real talk, refined tips, and just the right mix of polish and personality. So pour something sweet and join me for a thoughtful conversation with a generous helping of charm and circumstance. Let's start with why this even matters. One of the most common mistakes I see is when every room feels like it belongs to a different person or even a different house. The kitchen might be gray and white, the living room navy, the dining room terracotta, and the bedroom maybe mint green because that's what was on sale at the paint store that day. It happens more than you think. Each room may be beautiful individually. You might even love each color, but when you walk through the home, it feels like a patchwork quilt instead of a narrative. There's no rhythm, no flow, no emotional through line. When color changes dramatically from one room to another, your eye and your body never relaxes. You're constantly adjusting, and whether you realize it or not, your home stops feeling cohesive. Creating a whole home color story isn't about being matchy-matchy. It's about connection. It's about making sure that every room feels like a variation on the same beautiful melody. So let's talk about where we start. At AMI, every project begins with what I call the base palette. This is the foundation, the handful of colors that set the tone for the entire home. Usually that's between 3 and 5 hues that become our constants. Think of them as your wardrobe basics, the pieces that you can mix and layer endlessly. For example, in one recent new build, our base palette started with a soft ivory, a muted grayish, a gentle warm charcoal, and a whisper of antique brass. The palette set the emotional tone before we ever placed a single piece of furniture. From there, we expanded the story. The kitchen had creamy white cabinets with white marble veining and brass hardware. The living room introduced a deeper taupe in the drapery and a slate blue in the rug. The primary suite leaned into a romantic, dusty blush. And yet it all felt connected because those undertones, those soft, warm neutrals, quietly linked every space together. When you define your base palette, you're really defining your home's personality. Is it airy and sunlit, grounded and moody, earthy and organic, glamorous and refined? Once you answer that, every other question from wall color to fabric becomes easier. Now here's where most people get tripped up. Undertones. You can love blue, but is your blue icy and cool or warm and stormy? You can adore gray, but does it lean toward violet or green? These subtle differences are what separate a home that feels disjointed from one that feels intentionally layered. At AMI, we spend a lot of time in this stage, Comparing samples side by side, watching them shift in natural light, and testing how they interact with finishes like flooring or stone. One exercise I recommend, even if you're not working with a designer, is to collect your samples together and observe them in the same space. Lay your tile, paint swatches, fabric, and wood samples next to one another and ask yourself, do these feel like they belong to the same family? If something feels off, it probably is. Trust that instinct. We're not just building a palette. We're creating a language of color that your entire home will speak fluently. Once we have that foundation, the fun begins, layering variations. This is where each space develops its own personality. You might have a creamy base throughout, but the kitchen brings in polished nickel and oak. The living room introduces camel and slate. The den deepens into tobacco leather and charcoal. Each room feels distinct but connected, like chapters in the same story. One of my favorite examples was a historic renovation we completed a few years ago. The home had incredible bones, tall ceilings, millwork for days, but the previous owners had painted every room a completely different color. It was chaos. We stripped it back and started fresh. The base palette became warm white, soft taupe, and muted olive. We introduced antique bronze as a constant metal tone, and from there played with variations, deeper greens in the study, lighter neutrals in the living room, and a moody chocolate in the dining room. When you walked through the home, it just flowed. You didn't notice the paint, you noticed how the spaces made you feel. That's when you know you've nailed your color story, when it feels seamless, not forced. Now let's talk about my favorite part, the secret sauce. Every AMI project has what I call the unexpected thread. It's one accent color or material that subtly reappears throughout the home, not in a way that shouts, but in a way that whispers, this is who we are. Maybe it's a soft moss green that shows up in a pillow in the living room, the veining of a marble countertop, and the art above the bed, or a deep midnight blue that repeats in the cabinetry hardware, the powder room wallpaper, and a throw blanket in the den. This unexpected thread becomes your signature. It's what gives your home its quiet, recognizable identity, something guests can't quite name, but always feel. In one project, our thread was a muted coral, just a touch. It first appeared in a piece of art in the entryway, then again in a patterned fabric in the family room, and finally in a vase on the nightstand in a primary suite. It was subtle, but it made the entire home feel harmonious and curated, like it was all meant to be together. Color isn't just visual, it's emotional. It influences how you feel in your home. Soft neutrals invite calm. Deep tones create intimacy. Warm hues energize. Cool hues restore. When we're building a palette, I often ask clients, how do you want to feel when you walk in the door? That's the guiding question. Because at the end of the day, it's not about following a trend. It's about telling your story. One client wanted her home to feel like a quiet retreat after years of high energy city life. We leaned into sand, mushroom, and a faded indigo, tones that felt restful, timeless, and organic. Another family wanted warmth and connection. We used honeyed oak, aged brass, and layers of terracotta, camel, and cream. Their home now feels like a hug. That's the beauty of design done right. It reflects you. So if you're listening and thinking, okay, Ashley, I love this, but where do I start? Here are a few practical steps that you can take right now. The first thing is start with your fixed elements. Look at your floors, countertops, trim, and cabinets. Those tones dictate your base palette, not your favorite color. Number 2, limit your palette. Stick to 3 to 5 foundational colors, then layer variations rather than starting from scratch in each room. Number 3, test everything in natural light. Colors change throughout the day. What looks beige at noon might read green at dusk. Repeat your metals and woods. Consistency in finishes creates visual rhythm. Add 1 accent thread. Find your signature color, the one hue that appears quietly throughout your home. And then 6, trust the process. Building a color story takes time, intention, and observation. It's okay to pause before you paint every wall. Design is meant to evolve. I'll leave you with one of my favorite stories from the AMI portfolio. A few years ago, I worked with a couple who had just purchased their dream home, a stately property with beautiful architecture, but every room had been painted bold, saturated colors. Think purple dining room, cherry red kitchen, lime green laundry room. They wanted calm. They wanted connection. We started by defining their color story. Warm white, bone, soft mushroom, and a deep olive as our anchor. But the unexpected thread was the most fun. A hint of slate blue, of course it was blue, that we woven through art, pillows, and drapery trim. When the project was complete, the husband said to me, "I can't explain it, but this house feels peaceful now, like it exhaled." That's the power of color. When done right, it doesn't just change the look of your home, it changes how you live in it. Creating a whole home color story isn't about perfection. It's about harmony. It's about designing spaces that speak to one another, that tell your story with intention and grace. At AMI, we do this every day, studying light, texture, and tone to ensure every detail feels effortless and cohesive. So if you're dreaming of a home that feels like you, not just a collection of rooms, but a unified, thoughtful experience, let's chat. You can schedule a complimentary consultation at ashleymorganinteriors.com. We'll help you define your palette, refine your story, and bring your vision to life. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Charm and Circumstance. If you enjoyed this conversation, take a moment to subscribe, share it with a friend who's building or renovating, and leave a quick review. It means the world to me, and it helps more listeners find our little corner of charm, design, and purpose. Until next time, I'm Ashley, reminding you that the most beautiful homes aren't built from trends, they're built from stories. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining me on Charm and Circumstance. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along on Instagram, because charm is personal and circumstance is what you make of it.